These are 5 pet bird species people buy, expecting a calm starter bird, and 3 species so cognitively advanced that scientists have spent decades studying them alongside primates. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which birds are quiet because they're simply low-key, and which ones are quietly outsmarting you. Let's start with the 5. The canary tops the list, and its story starts with Spanish sailors and monks hauling them back from the Canary Islands, the Azores, and Madeira, with organized breeding stretching back to the 1500s and 1700s. For centuries, breeders selected for exactly one trait, and that trait was song, not problem-solving, not interaction. Modern bird-keeping guides still describe them that way today, labeling canaries less interactive birds that are better observed than handled. You don't train a canary, you listen to it. Here's the twist, though. Canaries became world famous not for being smart, but for being sensitive. Physician John Scott Haldane proposed the whole idea back in 1895, using small animals to detect carbon monoxide in coal mines after investigating an explosion at the Tylorstown Colliery in Wales the following year. By 1911, canaries were standard equipment in British mines, and they stayed there until 1986, when electronic gas detectors finally pushed them out. A canary takes in roughly twice the oxygen of a similarly sized animal per breath, which meant it collapsed from bad air long before any miner noticed a problem. That's not intelligence, that's biology doing the work. The canary didn't solve anything. It was the alarm bell. Next up is the ring-necked dove, a bird that's been domesticated for an estimated 2,000 to 3,000 years, kept historically in rooftop cotes, used in Roman rituals, and later worked into magicians' acts. Gentle, non-biting, and about as calm as birds get, the ring-necked dove has earned a reputation as the mellowest thing in the pet trade. Ask anyone who's actually owned one, though, and you'll hear the same line repeated. Aviculture guides call them moderately intelligent, and flat out not as trainable as parrots. And one longtime dove keeper summed it up best. These birds aren't stupid, they're just low-key. Doves can't even grip and climb cage bars the way parrots do. They only get around by flying, and their digestive system requires dietary grit just to break down whole seeds, something parrots never need. What you're looking at is a bird built for calm coexistence, not cognitive engagement. Third on the list, and this one's genuinely strange, is the society finch, a bird that doesn't exist in the wild at all. Breeders in China and Japan spent roughly 250 years shaping this bird from the wild white-rumped munia into something whose entire personality was engineered for life in a cage. Calm, easy, and rarely hand-tamed, according to nearly every care guide out there, the society finch shows little interest in being handled or in solving problems of any kind. Its most impressive skill isn't cognitive at all, it's parenting. And breeders actually use society finches as foster parents for more delicate finch species because their instinct to care for eggs and chicks is that reliable. Smart, not particularly. Useful, extremely. Then there's the Java sparrow, a bird with serious historical credentials. The Ming Dynasty kept these birds as early as the 1300s, and popularity in Japan followed not long after. Its name comes from the Latin orizivora, meaning rice eater, and that appetite explains why wild populations are now endangered, since rice farmers in its native range killed off huge numbers of them over the years. Bigger and bulkier than most finches, favoring large seeds like oats and rice, no source out there describes this bird as particularly clever, and it's actually illegal to own in California, and illegal to import as a wild-caught bird into the US over fears of feral populations wrecking crops. A fascinating bird historically, sure, but not one you're teaching tricks to. Number 5 is the zebra finch, and here's where things get complicated. One of the most popular pet finches on the planet, it gets lumped in constantly with starter bird, low interaction species. But the same bird happens to be one of the most heavily studied animals in neuroscience, a model organism researchers rely on to understand how brains learn vocal communication in the first place. peer-reviewed studies have found measurable associative learning, spatial learning, and social learning in zebra finches, and one study identified a general learning ability that explained over a third of the variation in how individual birds performed across 7 separate cognitive tasks. That is not a dumb bird. That is a bird whose reputation simply has not caught up to the science yet. If anything, the zebra finch proves that easy to keep and unintelligent are two completely different things. Which brings us to the real story, buried underneath all 5 of these birds. Back in 2016, researchers Pavel Nemetz and Susanna Herculano-Hosel, working with colleagues at Charles University and Vanderbilt University, published a landmark study in PNAS, and what they found reshaped how scientists talk about bird brains entirely. Parrot and songbird brains, it turns out, pack in roughly twice as many neurons as primate brains of the same mass, and 2 to 4 times as many neurons as similarly sized rodent brains. Herculano-Hosel put it bluntly, for a long time, having a bird brain was considered to be a bad thing. Now it turns out that it should be a compliment. Some parrot brains, she added, hold as many neurons as a mid-sized primate. So if brain size is not the bottleneck, which pet birds are actually putting that neural horsepower to work, that is where our 3 smart species come in. First up is the African gray parrot, and this story starts in 1977, when a researcher named Irene Pepperberg, fresh off a chemistry PhD from Harvard, walked into a pet shop and bought a 1-year-old African gray. She named him Alex, short for Avian Language Experiment, and over the next 30 years, working across Purdue, the University of Arizona, Harvard, and Brandeis, she documented something nobody expected from a bird. 50 different objects, 7 colors, 5 shapes. That's what Alex learned to identify, and he could count quantities up to 6 on top of it. He grasped abstract relationships too, understanding bigger, smaller, same, and different, and even something close to the concept of zero, the idea of absence itself. His working vocabulary topped 100 labels, and he used phrases like, I want X and wanna go Y functionally, rather than as mimicry. Pepperberg described his problem solving as comparable to a 5-year-old child, and his emotional expression as comparable to a 2-year-old. Alex died in 2007 at the age of 31, but the research never stopped. Pepperberg kept working with other African greys afterward, including birds named Griffin and Athena, and in one landmark memory experiment, a gray parrot actually matched a room full of Harvard undergraduates on a visual memory task. Not every scientist agrees on how much of this counts as language versus sophisticated conditioning, and that debate is still very much alive. What nobody disputes, though, is that Alex changed what we thought a bird brain was capable of doing. If Alex proved birds could understand language, the Goffin's cockatoo proved they could engineer solutions. Researcher Alice Auersperg, running what's known as the Goffin Lab, gave 10 Goffin's cockatoos a box holding a single cashew nut locked behind 5 separate interlocking devices: a pin, a screw, a bolt, a wheel, and a latch. One bird, nicknamed Pipin, worked through the entire 5-step sequence with 0 prior training, and Auersperg noted that outside of tool use sequences in chimpanzees, nobody had ever documented an animal solving a 5-step problem like that without training. And it didn't stop there. Later studies caught Goffin's cockatoos' manufacturing tools out of different materials, combining 2 tools to retrieve a single reward, and even carrying multiple tools together in anticipation of needing them down the line. What makes this especially impressive is that Goffin's cockatoos aren't tool users in the wild as a species-wide behavior. This is individual improvisation happening in real time, not instinct passed down through generations. Last on the smart list is the Quaker parrot, also known as the monk parakeet, first documented for Western science back in 1780. Considered one of the most intelligent small parrots in the pet trade, this bird builds a genuinely extensive vocabulary and mimics everyday sounds like doorbells and ringtones without much effort. But here's the thing, that same intelligence is exactly why the bird is controversial. Quaker parrots are the only parrot species that builds massive communal stick nests instead of nesting in cavities like nearly every other parrot out there. And feral populations descended from escaped pets have been thriving in cold climate U.S. cities like Chicago and New York since as far back as the 1960s, with their nests causing real damage to power infrastructure along the way. That mix of adaptability and intelligence has gotten Quaker parrots banned or restricted in roughly 10 U.S. states, plus Spain and Western Australia. With proper care, these birds can live over 30 years, which means bringing one home is a multi-decade commitment to one of the smartest, most demanding small birds you're legally allowed to keep. So here's where that leaves us. The dumb birds on this list aren't actually stupid. They're mostly birds bred for calm, low-interaction companionship, with little to no research ever done on their cognition in the first place. The smart birds, meanwhile, aren't just smart for birds, since Alex, the Goffin's cockatoos, and the Quaker parrot have all been formally compared to primates in published research, and in more than one case, match them outright. That's the list. If you want to know what you're doing with your bird that's quietly killing them, click here.